At 11:59 p.m., a ruthless legal contract forces Emma to permanently abandon the deaf, weeping 4-year-old girl desperately clinging to her chest. Why would a billionaire father intentionally orchestrate his own daughter's heartbreak? The chilling truth behind this midnight countdown will leave you absolutely speechless. There is a specific, suffocating kind of agony in watching a grandfather clock tick toward midnight when you know its hands are about to slice your life into two irreversible pieces. In the sprawling, dimly lit hallway of a multi-million-dollar Kensington penthouse, every strike of the pendulum sounded like a judge's gavel slamming against hardwood. It was 11:59 p.m. on an unforgiving, freezing winter night, and the snow falling silently outside perfectly mirrored the icy desolation within those walls. In the center of the vast living room, 26-year-old Emma sat crumpled on the floor, her eyes bloodshot, her spirit entirely shattered. Clinging frantically to her chest, her tiny fingers digging desperately into the wool of Emma's sweater, was Lily, a fragile 4-year-old girl who had lived her entire life in a vacuum, never even hearing the sound of her own heartbeat. This was the final countdown, the last desperate moments of a 1-year contract. In exactly 60 seconds, Emma was legally mandated to walk out into the freezing snow and permanently abandon the child who had become her entire world. But how did a strict, sterile business arrangement morph into a devastating tragedy of two broken hearts? Why is this young woman being forced to leave? And what cold, terrifying truth lies behind the billionaire standing in the shadows, waiting to sever their bond forever? Before we rewind the clock to uncover the breathtaking pain of this midnight goodbye, At When Home Hurts 2 warmly welcomes you. If you believe that the power of genuine, unconditional love can shatter even the most rigid, heartless rules of high society, please take a moment to hit the subscribe button. Your incredible support deeply motivates us to continue uncovering the raw, emotional stories of shattered homes and healing hearts. To truly comprehend the gravity of Emma's tears soaking into little Lily's dark curls, we must look back exactly 365 days. A year ago, Emma was a woman relentlessly hunted by her own ghosts. The sudden loss of her mother had left her completely unmoored, drowning in a sea of grief that threatened to pull her under the surface for good. She was desperate for an escape, a quiet place to bury herself in work and numb the echoing emptiness in her chest. That fragile lifeline presented itself in the form of a bizarrely demanding job listing: a live-in nanny for the notorious Walker estate. She thought she was simply accepting a temporary, lucrative assignment in a pristine fortress of ice. She had no idea she was signing away her soul, stepping into a meticulously designed emotional prison where she would discover the very thing that would eventually save and then shatter her life. Stepping through the heavy oak doors of the Walker estate for the first time, Emma carried only a battered suitcase and a heart numb to the world, utterly unprepared for the chilling reality that awaited her inside. The Kensington penthouse did not feel like a home. It felt like a mausoleum constructed of imported marble and glass, meticulously scrubbed of anything resembling human warmth. It was here that she was introduced to Arthur Walker, a billionaire whose eyes were as lifeless and gray as the London sky. He did not greet her with a handshake or a smile, but merely slid a terrifyingly thick, leather-bound contract across a mahogany desk. The stipulations were explicitly, brutally clear. Emma was to provide physical care, educational development, and strict routine supervision. She was never to kiss the child's forehead, never to refer to herself in any maternal capacity, and most importantly, she was to vacate the premises forever the moment her 365-day tenure expired. Any breach of these terms would result in immediate termination and absolute financial ruin. Emma, desperate for the generous salary that would pay off her late mother's medical debts, signed her name on the dotted line without hesitation, believing she possessed no remaining emotional capacity to care anyway. Then, Arthur led her down the long, echoing corridor to a sterile, white playroom, and Emma's frozen world shattered. Sitting in the center of the vast, empty floor was Lily. The 4-year-old possessed a ghostly pallor, her dark curls framing a face that lacked the innocent curiosity inherent to childhood. She was completely deaf, a medical complication from a traumatic birth, but her silence went far beyond her lack of hearing. Lily was deeply, profoundly isolated, trapped inside a void where no one had ever bothered to reach in and hold her. As the little girl looked up, her dark, empty eyes meeting Emma's grief-stricken gaze, an unspoken recognition passed between them. They were two shipwrecks in the same ocean, both drowning in a silence they did not choose. And Emma knew in that instant that the cold, legal document she had just signed was completely worthless against the gravity of this child's lonely soul. Yet, beneath the oppressive, orchestrated silence of that multi-million-dollar penthouse, it took only a single, hesitant touch from a small hand to crack the foundation of Emma's carefully guarded grief. Over the next several months, a quiet, vibrant revolution began to bloom within the gray walls of the Walker estate. Emma did not just feed and dress the child as she had been contracted to do. She threw herself into learning American Sign Language with a fierce, burning desperation to give Lily a voice. The sterile playroom was slowly transformed into a sanctuary of color and movement. Emma brought in finger paints that stained the pristine white rugs, baked cookies that filled the immaculate hallways with the scent of vanilla, and taught Lily how to place her tiny hands against the stereo speakers to feel the booming vibrations of a bass guitar. For the first time in her short, tragic life, Lily learned how to laugh. A beautiful, breathless pantomime of joy that required no sound to echo loudly in Emma's healing heart. They developed their own secret vocabulary, a series of intimate gestures and expressions that tethered them to one another. When Lily scraped her knee, Emma did not just apply a bandage as the previous nannies had done. She pulled the trembling girl into her arms, pressing her lips to the child's hair, brazenly violating Section 4 of her employment contract. In saving Lily from the dark, Emma inadvertently pulled herself out of the grave she had been digging since her mother's funeral. She was no longer a ghost haunting her own life. She was a mother in every way that mattered. But this beautiful, blooming garden of affection was being watched. From the shadows of the mezzanine, Arthur stood paralyzed night after night, observing the undeniable bond knitting between his daughter and the hired help. His face remained a mask of stone, but his knuckles would turn white as he gripped the railing, torn between a desperate, agonizing longing to join the warmth of their laughter and an absolute, terrifying conviction that this love was a dangerous poison that would inevitably destroy them all. But just as the vibrant hues of spring began to bleed into the penthouse's gray walls, the looming shadow of the one-year clause darkened everything, forcing Emma to uncover the terrifying truth behind Arthur's cruelty. The countdown had silently breached the 6-month mark when Emma finally marched into the billionaire's dimly lit study, demanding to know why a father would systematically hire and fire caregivers just as his disabled daughter began to trust them. Arthur did not yell. Instead, he poured a glass of scotch with a trembling hand, the icy facade finally fracturing to reveal a man entirely consumed by trauma. The story he unraveled was a horror tragedy of its own making. Lily's mother, Arthur's beloved wife, had died mere hours after giving birth, plunging Arthur into a psychological abyss he never truly escaped. He had loved his wife with a ferocity that bordered on madness, and her sudden absence had nearly killed him. Twisted by a distorted sense of protection, Arthur had vowed that Lily would never, ever experience the agonizing, soul-crushing grief of losing a mother. His solution, born of wealth and severe paranoia, was the 1-year rotation. If Lily never had a consistent maternal figure, if a nanny was forcibly removed the moment an attachment began to form, the child's heart would remain safely guarded from the ultimate betrayal of abandonment. Emma listened in horrified disbelief, realizing that the contract wasn't born of malice, but of a deeply broken man's paralyzing fear of love. She pleaded with him, tears streaming down her face, arguing that starving a child to protect her from eventually being hungry was a far crueler death. She promised she would never leave, that she would adopt Lily, marry him in name only, anything to stay. But Arthur, trapped in the prison of his own past, was completely unreachable. He looked at Emma's tear-stained face, saw the ghost of his dead wife in the fierce, protective way she spoke of his daughter, and firmly shook his head. The contract would stand, and the relentless ticking of the clock grew louder, transforming the remaining months into an excruciating death march toward an inevitable execution. Knowing the tragic roots of the billionaire's madness did nothing to soften the devastating blow of winter's arrival, dragging us violently back to that sprawling hallway where a grandfather clock prepared to steal a little girl's mother for the second time. It is exactly 11:59 p.m., the seconds bleeding away as Emma kneels on the hardwood floor, suffocating under the weight of a child who refuses to let go. Lily is crying with a ferocity that shakes her small, fragile frame, her tiny hands frantically forming the signs they had practiced so many times. Please, stay, Mom, love. Each gesture is a jagged knife twisting directly into Emma's chest. She kisses the child's tear-soaked cheeks, her own vision blurring as she desperately signs back, "Always in my heart, never truly gone." But how do you explain the complex, twisted legalities of a broken man's grief to a 4-year-old who only knows that her universe is walking out the door into the freezing snow? As the heavy pendulum swings, Arthur steps out from the shadows of his study, his bespoke suit immaculate, his face a terrifying portrait of suppressed agony. He approaches to pry his hysterical daughter from the only true warmth she has ever known. Emma looks up at him, her eyes completely devoid of the deference she once held, radiating a fierce, haunting judgment. "You aren't saving her from grief, Arthur," she whispers, her voice a ragged, breathless rasp over the sound of the ticking clock. "You are just making sure you are the one who causes it." The first heavy gong of the midnight bell strikes. The sound reverberates through the penthouse, a physical blow that shatters the stagnant air. Arthur reaches down, his hands trembling violently as his fingers brush against Lily's. But as the child looks up at her father, her dark eyes wide with a terror that perfectly mirrors the look his late wife gave him in her final moments, Arthur freezes. The second gong sounds, then the third. Emma slowly stands, pulling the weeping child back into her chest, wrapping her arms around Lily like a shield against the billionaire's fractured world. The clock strikes 12 times, marking the legal expiration of the contract, but no one moves toward the door. In the heavy, agonizing silence that follows the final chime, the billionaire drops to his knees on the cold hardwood, burying his face into Emma's shoulder alongside his daughter, finally allowing the dam of his decades-long grief to break. The contract had officially expired, but for the first time in 4 years, a family had just been born. The story of Emma, Arthur, and little Lily is a poignant testament to the unstoppable force of human connection and the destructive nature of unprocessed trauma. Initially bound by a sterile, tyrannical contract designed to prevent the pain of loss, Emma steps into a mausoleum of wealth that has starved a deaf child of affection. Instead of adhering to the billionaire's cold stipulations, she chooses the radical path of love, teaching Lily how to communicate, laugh, and feel the warmth of genuine maternal care. Arthur's rigid one-year rule, born not from malice but from the paralyzing fear of repeating the devastating loss of his wife, creates an agonizing countdown to heartbreak. He believed that by shielding his daughter from attachment, he was protecting her from grief, failing to see that he was condemning her to a life devoid of joy. However, when the clock strikes midnight, the exact moment their enforced separation is meant to occur, the raw, undeniable reality of Lily's terror shatters Arthur's icy facade. Emma's defiant love and piercing realization that isolating a child is the cruelest form of grief ultimately break the cycle of trauma. In the end, the expiration of the legal document marks not a departure, but a beautiful rebirth. Arthur's physical surrender to his long-buried sorrow signifies the collapse of his defensive walls, proving that the risk of heartbreak is always worth the profound beauty of family and authentic connection. The deepest lesson drawn from this story is that you cannot selectively numb pain without also numbing joy. Arthur attempted to shield his daughter from the agony of loss by entirely removing the possibility of love. But in doing so, he inflicted a far more suffocating trauma: profound loneliness. Love intrinsically carries the risk of loss, but guarding your heart so fiercely that nothing can enter is a far crueler fate. True safety is not found in isolation, but in the courage to be vulnerable and the willingness to experience the full spectrum of human emotion. In today's fast-paced world, it is incredibly easy to build our own fortresses of ice. We often use extreme busyness, emotional detachment, or superficial digital connections as shields to protect ourselves from rejection, heartbreak, or failure. To apply this lesson today, we must consciously choose vulnerability over defensive isolation. If you have been hurt in the past, acknowledge the trauma, but do not let it dictate your future relationships. Take the terrifying step of opening up to a friend, committing deeply to a partner, or showing genuine, unfiltered affection to your loved ones. Do not let the fear of a potential goodbye prevent you from experiencing a beautiful hello. If you had to choose between experiencing a deep, meaningful love that might eventually bring you pain, or living a perfectly safe but emotionally empty life, which would you choose? Please share your thoughts and viewpoints in the comments section below. We would love to read your perspective and learn from each other. If you enjoyed this story and found value in its message, please subscribe to the channel. Your support gives us the motivation to keep creating more inspiring and beautiful content for you.